He buried the truth under a luxury watch and thought no one would ever notice. The crystal chandeliers of Halstead & Rowe cast soft gold across white tablecloths as Emily Carter balanced a tray of sparkling water and stepped into the private dining room. It was a Tuesday night in Manhattan. The kind where deals worth hundreds of millions were discussed over ribeye and Napa Valley Cabernet. Emily moved with quiet precision. Black uniform pressed. Hair tied back. Eyes alert. Table 7. Jonathan Reed. 42. Founder of Reed Dynamics. A man who could move markets with a sentence. He didn't look up when she approached. His attention stayed on the men across from him. If the numbers don't close by Q4, we walk, he said, tapping the table once with his finger. His voice was calm. Controlled. Final. Emily set down the water glasses one by one. The soft clink of glass filled the small pauses between sentences. She noticed the watch immediately. Swiss. Patek Philippe. Platinum case. The kind that cost more than her yearly rent in Queens. It sat perfectly on his wrist. Immaculate. Except for one thing. When he reached for his glass, the sleeve shifted. Just an inch. Just enough. Emily's hand paused mid-air. There was a faint scar beneath the edge of the watch. Not dramatic. Not obvious. But deliberate. Covered. Hidden. Her expression did not change. Still or sparkling, she asked. Jonathan finally glanced at her. Brief. Assessing. Then gone. Still. She nodded and poured. The water caught the light as it filled the glass. For a second, she could hear the ticking. Not loud. Not mechanical. But present. Like something counting down. We'll need another 10 minutes, one of the investors said. Of course, Emily replied. She stepped back. Then stopped. Her eyes flicked once more to the watch. That same subtle shift. That same line beneath it. A memory pressed against the surface of her mind. She turned and walked toward the service station. You good? Mia whispered, grabbing a stack of menus. Emily reached for a clean cloth. Yeah. Her voice stayed even. Just table 7. Mia followed her gaze. That's Reed. Big money tonight. Emily nodded once. I can tell. She wiped an already clean surface. The motion was automatic. Controlled. But her mind was elsewhere. August. Heat rising off concrete. Sirens in the distance. A crowd gathered behind yellow tape. She blinked. The memory slipped away before it could fully form. Hey, Mia nudged her. Don't drift. He's not the forgiving type. Emily gave a small, almost invisible smile. Neither am I. Back at the table, Jonathan checked his watch. A precise movement. Habitual. The investors leaned in as he spoke again. We close this clean. No loose ends. Emily watched from across the room. Just for a second. Then she picked up the water pitcher and walked back. Each step measured. Each breath steady. She reached his side. Refill, she asked. He extended his glass without looking. As she poured, her fingers brushed the edge of his wrist. Light. Accidental. Or not. The watch shifted again. This time, she saw it clearly. The scar. And beneath it, faintly etched into the metal backing. A date. Her breath almost caught. Almost. She finished pouring and set the pitcher down. Jonathan pulled his wrist back slightly. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. Careful, he said. Emily met his eyes. Calm. Unshaken. I always am. The room continued around them. Deals. Numbers. Quiet laughter. But something had changed. Something small. Something precise. Emily stepped back into the rhythm of the restaurant. But her mind locked onto that date. Because she knew it. And if she was right, that watch was not just expensive. It was evidence. Emily did not return to the kitchen right away. She stopped at the service station and pulled a small notepad from her apron. Her pen hovered for a second. Then she wrote it down. August 14th. The numbers felt heavier on paper than they should. You are writing during a rush now? Mia glanced over, half amused. Emily closed the pad. Just something I do not want to forget. Mia shrugged and walked off with a tray of appetizers. Across the room, Jonathan Reed leaned back slightly as one of the investors slid a folder toward him. Thick. Cream-colored. The kind used for final drafts, not negotiations. We cleaned up the liability section, the investor said. Everything is sealed. No exposure. Jonathan opened the folder. His eye scanned quickly. Efficient. Cold. Good, he replied. Then we move forward. Emily picked up a tray with 2 plates of ribeye and stepped toward table 7. The smell of seared steak and butter filled the air. A normal night. A normal service. Except it was not. She placed the plates down carefully. Medium rare. Extra truffle butter on the side. One of the investors smiled. Looks perfect. Jonathan did not touch his food yet. He was still reading. Emily stepped back. Then she saw it. The folder had shifted slightly. Just enough for a page beneath to peek out. A printed header. City of New York. Department of Buildings. Her pulse tightened. She adjusted a fork. A small movement. Intentional. The folder slid another inch. Now the line was clear. Incident report. August 14th. 8th Avenue structural failure. Emily's fingers stilled on the tablecloth. Jonathan noticed. His hand moved instantly. He closed the folder with a sharp motion and looked up. Is there something wrong with the setup? His tone was polite. Too polite. Controlled. Emily met his gaze. No, sir. Everything is exactly where it should be. A pause stretched between them. One of the investors cleared his throat. We were just discussing compliance. Nothing relevant to the deal. Emily gave a small nod. Of course. She turned to leave. But Jonathan spoke again. Wait. She stopped. Turned back. What is your name? The question landed differently than the others he had asked tonight. Direct. Focused. Emily, she said. Emily Carter. He studied her for a second longer than necessary. Then he nodded once. Thank you, Emily. She walked away. Her steps remained steady. Her breathing did not change. But something inside her had shifted. That was not coincidence. Not anymore. Back at the service station, she reached under the counter and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up. She typed quickly. August 14th 8th Avenue collapse, New York. The search results appeared instantly. Headlines. Archived articles. A brief report. Limited coverage. She tapped the first link. A photo loaded. Yellow tape. A partially collapsed facade. Emergency vehicles lining the street. Her eye scanned the caption. Minor structural failure. No reported fatalities. Emily's jaw tightened slightly. She zoomed in on the image. There. Near the edge. A figure on the ground. Barely visible. Covered by a thermal blanket. She knew that blanket. She remembered the weight of it. She remembered the heat of the pavement under her knees. Emily. Mia's voice snapped her back. Order up. Emily locked the phone and slid it back into her apron. She picked up the next tray. Burgers. Fries. A side of coleslaw. Ordinary. Safe. She moved through the dining room again. But now she watched table 7 differently. Jonathan had put the folder away. His watch was back in place. Perfect. Untouched. Untouchable. He laughed at something one of the investors said. Smooth. Effortless. As if nothing had ever happened. As if nothing had ever been hidden. Emily stopped at a nearby table and set down a plate. Her reflection caught briefly in the polished surface of a wine glass. Calm face. Steady eyes. No hesitation. But inside, the pieces were aligning. The date. The report. The lie? She turned her head slightly. Just enough to see him again. Jonathan Reed lifted his glass. The watch caught the light. That same precise glint. That same careful placement over the scar. Emily whispered under her breath. You did not lose anything that day. She picked up her tray and walked forward. You took something. And now she needed to prove it. Emily did not slow down, but she changed direction. Instead of returning to the kitchen, she walked past the bar and toward the manager's office. The door was slightly open. Inside, Mr. Halstead was reviewing receipts under a small desk lamp. Emily, he looked up. Everything okay out there? She stepped in and closed the door behind her. I need 5 minutes. Off the floor. He frowned. Now is not a great time. Emily held his gaze. Calm. Direct. It is important. He studied her for a second, then sighed. 5 minutes. No more. Emily nodded once and moved to the small computer on the side desk. She logged in quickly. Her fingers moved with practiced precision. Not the speed of a server. The speed of someone who had done this before. She opened the internal reservation system. Then the archived security feed. Date filter. She entered tonight's date. Then she rewound to 40 minutes earlier. The screen flickered. There he was. Jonathan Reed walking in. Coat over his arm. Watch already on his wrist. Emily leaned closer. Frame by frame. When he checked in at the host stand, he adjusted his sleeve. The watch shifted. The underside flashed for less than a second. Emily paused the video. Zoomed in. The image blurred slightly, but the engraving was still visible. August 14th. Clear enough. Permanent. Emily. Mr. Halstead's voice sharpened. What exactly are you doing? She did not turn. Confirming something. He stepped closer. This is not part of your job. Emily finally looked at him. Neither is covering up a city report. Silence filled the small office. He blinked. I do not know what you think you are seeing, but you need to get back out there. Emily reached into her apron and pulled out her phone. She opened the article again. Then placed it next to the paused frame on the monitor. Same date. Same incident. He has the report, she said quietly. And he has that watch. That is not coincidence. Mr. Halstead rubbed his temple. You are making a serious accusation about a man who just booked this entire room. Emily's voice stayed even. I am stating what I can prove. He hesitated. That was new. Not belief. Not agreement. But hesitation. A crack. Emily turned back to the screen and hit play. The footage moved again. Jonathan stepped away from the host stand and greeted one of the investors. They shook hands. Close. Clear. Something passed between them. Not a folder. Not yet. but a small envelope. Cream-colored. The same shade as the one now sitting on the table. Emily paused again. "There," she said. Mr. Halstead leaned in despite himself. "What am I looking at?" "A transfer," Emily replied. Before the meeting even started. She straightened. Her posture shifted. Subtle. But real. She was no longer reacting. She was building. If that envelope matches the documents on the table, then the report was brought in tonight. Not archived. Not forgotten. Active. Mr. Halstead exhaled slowly. "Even if you are right, that does not explain your interest." Emily's eyes softened for the first time. Just slightly. "I was there." He looked at her. Really looked this time. "What do you mean?" Emily did not answer immediately. She picked up the phone and scrolled to another image. Not from the news. From her own gallery. A photo taken years ago. A street corner. Orange cones. A temporary barricade. She handed it to him. "I took that 10 minutes before it happened." He studied the image. Then looked back at her. "And after?" Emily took the phone back. Her thumb hovered over the next photo. She did not show it yet. "After," she said quietly, "someone did not make it out." The room fell still. Mr. Halstead's voice dropped. "Emily, if this is personal, you need to step back." She shook her head. "Once. It is not personal." A beat. Then she added, "It is unfinished." From the dining room, a burst of laughter echoed faintly through the wall. Jonathan Reed's voice carried above the others. Confident. Untouched. Emily slipped her phone back into her apron. She turned toward the door. 5 minutes, Mr. Halstead reminded her. Emily placed her hand on the handle. Then paused. "I am going back out there." Her tone was steady. "Certain. But this time, I am not just serving dinner." She opened the door and stepped into the light of the restaurant again. Across the room, Jonathan reached for his glass. The watch caught the chandelier glow. Precise. Controlled. Untouchable. For now. Emily picked up a fresh pitcher of water. And this time, she walked toward him with a plan. Emily approached table 7 with steady hands and a fresh linen folded over her arm. The room felt sharper now. Every sound carried further. Every glance lingered longer. Jonathan Reed was mid-sentence when she arrived. "We finalize tonight," he said, tapping the closed folder once. "No revisions after this." One of the investors nodded. Clean and quiet. Emily placed a small dish of sea salt beside his plate. A simple action. Routine. But her eyes tracked the folder. Cream-colored. Slightly worn at the edge. Recently handled. "Would you like me to clear anything?" she asked. Jonathan looked up. His gaze held hers this time. Not dismissive. Measuring. Not yet. Emily inclined her head. Then she reached forward and adjusted his steak knife by 1/2 inch. The movement was precise. Intentional. His wrist shifted again. The watch tilted. The engraving flashed under the light. August 14th. She did not look at it directly. She let it sit in her peripheral vision. Then she spoke. That date must mean something important. The table stilled. One investor gave a small laugh. Anniversary. Jonathan's expression did not change. Just a date. Emily nodded once. Of course. She stepped back. Then paused. It is interesting, she added, her tone neutral, how some dates stay with people longer than others. Jonathan's fingers tightened slightly around his glass. Barely visible. But real. We are done here, he said to the table, his voice calm but firmer now. Give us a minute. The investors exchanged quick looks. One of them closed his notebook. Another took a sip of wine and stood. Within seconds, they moved away toward the bar, leaving the two of them alone in the private room. The air shifted. Quieter. Heavier. Jonathan leaned back in his chair. You are very observant, Emily. It is part of the job, she replied. He tapped the folder lightly. And this is not. Emily's gaze dropped to the table. Then lifted again. No, it is not. A beat passed. Then she moved. She reached for the empty bread plate near his right hand. As she lifted it, her other hand brushed the edge of the folder. Just enough. It slid a fraction. Not enough to be obvious. Enough to reveal a corner. A clipped document inside. A signature line. Jonathan Reed. And beneath it, a second name. Daniel Hayes. Emily's breath slowed. Controlled. She set the plate aside. Would you like fresh bread? She asked. Jonathan did not answer immediately. His eyes were on her now. Fully. Where did you learn to move like that? He asked. The question was quiet. Direct. Emily met his gaze. You notice details when you have to. He studied her. Then leaned forward slightly. And what exactly do you think you see here? Emily did not look at the folder again. She did not need to. I see a report that says no one was lost. Her voice remained even. And a name that should not be there. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Just once. Then released. Careful, he said softly. You are stepping into something you do not understand. Emily held his gaze. I understand enough to know that someone signed off on a version of the truth. Silence stretched between them. The chandelier light reflected off the watch again. Precise. Cold. Jonathan reached down and closed the folder fully. This time, he placed his hand over it. Protective. Final. You should go back to your tables, he said. Emily did not move. Not yet. Daniel Hayes, she said quietly. He was not in the report. Jonathan's eyes flickered. A fraction of a second. But it was there. Confirmation. He recovered quickly. You are done here. Emily straightened. She picked up her tray. Calm. Professional. But the balance had shifted. Slightly. Irreversibly. I will bring the check when you are ready, she said. Then she turned and walked out of the private room. Behind her, Jonathan remained still for a moment. Then he reached for his watch. Adjusted it. Covered the engraving again. But this time, his hand lingered a second too long. Across the room, Emily stopped near the service station. She set the tray down. Her reflection caught again in the polished glass. Steady. Focused. She whispered under her breath. Daniel Hayes. The name settled into place. Not just a detail. A key. And if that name was on the document tonight, then someone in that room knew exactly what had been erased. Emily did not look away from the glass in front of her, but she felt the shift before she saw it. The private room door opened behind her. Slow. Deliberate. She turned just enough to catch the reflection. Jonathan Reed stepped out alone. No folder in his hand. No watch adjustment this time. Just control. Emily, he said. Not loud. Not sharp. But it carried. Conversations nearby softened without fully stopping. She turned to face him. Yes, sir. He stopped a few feet away. Close enough to lower his voice. Walk with me. It was not a request. Emily picked up a small order pad from the counter and followed. They moved toward the hallway near the restrooms. Quieter. Narrower. away from the main floor. Jonathan stopped near a framed black and white photograph of old Manhattan. He turned to her. "You have been asking questions." Emily held his gaze. "I have been noticing things." He gave a small nod. "That is usually where problems start." She did not respond. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out something small. A business card. Thick. Embossed. Read dynamics. He held it between two fingers. "Most people in your position understand boundaries," he said. "They see something they do not like, and they move on." Emily glanced at the card, then back at him. "And if they do not?" Jonathan's expression did not change. "They usually find a better opportunity somewhere else." He extended the card slightly closer. "I can make that happen for you. Tonight." The hallway felt tighter now. The hum of the restaurant faded behind them. Emily did not take the card. "You are offering me a job?" she asked. "I am offering you distance," he replied. "From something that does not concern you." Emily's voice stayed calm. "It concerns someone named Daniel Hayes." A flicker crossed his eyes again. Faster this time. Harder to hide. "You are out of line," he said quietly. Emily tilted her head slightly. "Then why are we not back at your table?" Silence pressed in. Jonathan lowered the card a fraction. Then he slipped it back into his pocket. The offer was gone. The tone changed. "Listen carefully," he said. "What you think you saw is incomplete. You do not have context. You do not have authority. And you definitely do not have leverage." Emily let the words settle. Then she spoke. "I have a date. I have a report. And I have a signature that should not exist." Jonathan stepped closer. Not aggressive. Controlled. "You have a misunderstanding." Emily did not move. Then correct it. A beat. Then another. The balance shifted again. Not fully. Not safely. But enough. Jonathan exhaled slowly. His hand moved to his wrist. For the first time, he did not adjust the watch. He removed it. The motion was smooth. Practiced. He held it in his palm for a second. Then he turned it slightly so the back caught the light. The engraving was clearer now. Deeper than she thought. Not just a date. A line beneath it. Emily leaned in just enough to read. August 14th. D.H. The initials sat there. Permanent. Undeniable. Jonathan closed his hand around the watch again. "You see a name," he said. "I see a liability that was handled." Emily's voice dropped. Handled is not the same as resolved. His jaw tightened. "In my world, it is." A server passed by at the end of the hallway, glancing briefly before continuing on. The moment remained contained. Quiet. Dangerous. Emily straightened. "You brought that report here tonight," she said. "Which means it still matters." Jonathan slipped the watch back onto his wrist. Covered. Controlled. "Everything matters until it does not," he replied. Then he stepped back. Distance restored. Authority reassembled. "Go back to work, Emily." He turned and walked toward the private room. No rush. No hesitation. Emily stood there for a second. Then she looked down at her own hands. Steady. Still. But now holding something new. Not proof. Not yet. But direction. She walked back toward the service station. As she passed the bar, Mia leaned in. What was that about? Emily picked up a tray without looking at her. A correction, she said. She moved toward the kitchen doors. Then stopped. Her phone buzzed softly in her apron. A new notification. Unknown. Sender. She pulled it out. A single message. No greeting. No name. Just a photo attachment. Emily tapped it open. The image loaded slowly. A scanned document. Same header. City of New York. Department of Buildings. But this version was different. A line near the bottom highlighted in red. One confirmed fatality. Name, Daniel Hayes. Emily's breath slowed. Then steadied. Because if this version existed, then someone had kept the original. Emily did not move for a full second after the image loaded. The noise of the restaurant came rushing back in layers. Glassware. Low laughter. The steady rhythm of service. But her focus narrowed to the screen in her hand. The highlighted line stayed sharp. One confirmed fatality. Daniel Hayes. This was not a rumor. Not a memory. This was documentation. And someone had sent it to her. She locked the phone and slipped it back into her apron. Then she turned toward the kitchen doors and pushed through. Heat wrapped around her instantly. The smell of garlic, butter, and grilled meat filled the space. Orders were being called out. Plates moved fast across the pass. Chef Ramirez glanced up. Emily, I need those steaks run now. She nodded. On it. She picked up 2 plates. Her hands were steady again. Not just controlled. Focused. She moved back onto the floor. But now she was not reacting. She was placing pieces. Table 7 came into view. The investors had returned. Jonathan was seated again. The folder was back on the table. Closed. Guarded. Emily approached. She set the plates down without a word. Then she leaned slightly toward the man seated to Jonathan's left. Mid-50s. Silver hair. Expensive cufflinks. Sir, your bourbon, she said, placing a fresh glass beside him. The man smiled. Thank you. His name tag from earlier introductions came back to her. Richard Cole. Cole Capital. He had been the one who mentioned compliance. Emily straightened. Then she made a small adjustment to the table setting near him. Close enough to speak without drawing attention. Mr. Cole, she said quietly, is this your first time working with Reed Dynamics? He glanced up, mildly surprised. Why do you ask? Emily kept her tone neutral. Just making conversation. He gave a small shrug. We have crossed paths before. Why? Emily held his gaze for half a second longer. Then she said, because tonight seems important. He smiled faintly. It is always important at this level. Emily nodded. Of course. She stepped back. But she had seen it. The slight hesitation. The way his fingers tapped once against his glass. He did not know everything. Or he knew just enough to be careful. That mattered. Across the table, Jonathan watched the exchange without turning his head. His awareness was precise. He did not interrupt. But his attention sharpened. Emily moved away. She reached the service station and picked up a clean receipt holder. Inside, she slipped a small folded napkin. Then she took out her phone again. She opened the image. Cropped the highlighted line. Enlarged the name. Daniel Hayes. Then she did something deliberate. She placed the phone face down inside the receipt holder. Visible only when opened. Mia approached with a stack of glasses. You are moving weird tonight, she said under her breath. Emily gave a small smile. Just busy. Mia narrowed her eyes. You sure? Emily picked up the receipt holder. I am sure. She walked back toward table 7. This time, she did not go to Jonathan first. She stopped beside Richard Cole. Sir, she said, the manager asked me to leave this with you. He frowned slightly. For me? Yes, sir. She placed the holder gently on the table beside his glass. Then she stepped back. Jonathan's gaze shifted instantly. He looked at the holder. Then at Emily. The room felt tighter again. Richard hesitated. Then he opened it. His eyes dropped to the phone screen. The color drained slightly from his face. Not dramatically. Controlled. But real. He looked up. First at Emily. Then at Jonathan. Is there something I should know? He asked. The question hung in the air. Not loud. But heavy enough to shift the room. Jonathan did not answer immediately. His hand moved toward the folder. Protective again. But slower this time. Emily stood still. No longer just part of the service. She had introduced a variable. And now it was moving. Jonathan finally spoke. We can discuss that privately, he said. Richard did not close the holder. I would prefer to understand it now. A small silence followed. One of the other investors leaned forward slightly. Curious. Alert. The balance at the table tilted. Just enough. Emily turned away before anyone could look back at her. She walked toward the bar. Calm. Measured. But inside, something had locked into place. Because whoever sent that file had not chosen her by accident. And if they wanted this scene, then tonight was not just about exposure. It was about timing. Emily picked up a glass and wiped it slowly. Her reflection stared back at her. Focused. Ready. Because if someone else was already inside this, then the next move would not come from her. Richard Cole did not close the receipt holder. He kept it open on the table, his fingers resting lightly on the edge as if the object itself had weight. The glow from the phone screen reflected faintly in his glasses. Jonathan, he said, voice steady but lower now, this report shows a fatality that was never disclosed. The other investors shifted in their seats. One of them leaned closer. What is he talking about? Jonathan did not answer immediately. He reached for his water instead. A controlled pause. A calculated breath. Then he set the glass down. We are not discussing internal matters in a restaurant, he said. Richard did not move. Then we should not have signed anything tied to it. That landed. Clean. Direct. The word signed hung in the air longer than anything else. Emily, standing near the bar, did not look at them. But she listened. Every tone. Every shift. One of the investors, younger, impatient, leaned forward. Hold on. What exactly is this about? Richard tapped the edge of the receipt holder. About a structural incident that was reported as non-fatal. He glanced at Jonathan. Apparently, that was not accurate. Jonathan's jaw tightened once. Then he leaned forward, hands clasped. You are looking at an incomplete document. Richard shook his head slightly. No. I am looking at a version that was not shared. Silence pressed in again. The room had changed. Not loud. Not chaotic. But different. The easy confidence was gone. Replaced by calculation. Emily picked up a tray and moved toward another table. A couple near the window asked for dessert menus. She handed them over with a polite smile. Take your time. Her voice was steady. Unaffected. But her eyes flicked once toward table 7. Jonathan shifted his focus. Not to Richard. Not to the others. To Emily. For a brief second, their eyes met across the room. This time, there was no dismissal. No casual authority. There was recognition. He knew she had moved something. Not just a document. The room itself. He broke eye contact first. Gentlemen, he said, we will pause this discussion. One investor frowned. Pause? We are about to finalize. Jonathan's tone hardened slightly. And we will finalize when everything is clear. Richard leaned back in his chair. That is the first reasonable thing you have said tonight. The tension shifted again. Not resolved, but redirected. Emily moved back to the service station. Mia leaned in immediately. Okay, what did you do? Emily placed the tray down. I served dinner. Mia rolled her eyes. Yeah, and somehow the billionaires looked like they just saw a ghost. Emily picked up a glass and wiped it slowly. People react when they see something they were not supposed to. Mia studied her for a second. Then shook her head. You are going to get yourself in trouble. Emily's reflection stared back at her from the glass. Calm. Focused. Not tonight. Back at the table, Richard closed the receipt holder but did not hand it back. Instead, he slipped it beside his own folder. Claimed. That was new. A small shift. But visible. Jonathan noticed. His fingers tapped once against the table. Then stopped. Where did you get that? He asked. Richard met his gaze. That is exactly what I am trying to figure out. The question lingered. Not just between them. Across the entire table. Because if one version existed here, then there could be more. And if there were more, then someone had been holding them. Jonathan leaned back slightly. His hand moved to his wrist again. He adjusted the watch. Covered the engraving. But the gesture was slower now. Less certain. Across the room, Emily set the glass down. Her phone buzzed again. She did not reach for it immediately. She already knew. This was not over. She wiped her hands on a clean cloth. Then finally took the phone out. Another message. Same unknown sender. This time, not a photo. A short line of text. Check the witness list. Emily's eyes narrowed slightly. Because if there was a witness list, then someone else had been there that day. And that someone had just stepped back into the story. Emily did not react immediately to the message. She slipped the phone back into her apron and reached for a tray of empty glasses. Around her, the restaurant regained a fragile rhythm. Conversations resumed. Silverware clinked. But table 7 had shifted into something sharper. Controlled tension. Calculated silence. Jonathan Reed leaned forward again, but this time his posture was different. Less defensive. More deliberate. Gentlemen, he said, voice smooth again, we are not going to let a partial document derail a transaction of this scale. One of the investors nodded slowly. Then clarify it. Jonathan gave a small, confident smile. Gladly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a second folder. Dark grey. Thicker. It had not been on the table before. That was new. He placed it down with quiet precision. This, he said, opening it, is the finalized compliance package. Richard Cole did not move closer. He watched instead. Careful. Including the incident report. Jonathan flipped a page. Including the corrected version. He turned the folder slightly so the others could see. Emily passed behind them at that exact moment, carrying a tray. Her eyes did not linger, but she caught enough. A stamped header. Official. Clean. A signature block at the bottom. Redacted. The line where a name should be was blacked out completely. There was confusion in the initial filing, Jonathan continued. It was resolved internally. No outstanding liabilities. One of the investors exhaled. Relief mixed with uncertainty. So there was a fatality. Jonathan did not hesitate. There was an incident that was misreported. He closed the folder halfway. And it has been addressed. The distinction was subtle. Intentional. Richard leaned forward slightly now. Addressed how? Jonathan met his gaze. In a way that protects everyone at this table. That shifted something. Not clarity. But comfort. For some. Not for all. Emily reached the service station and set her tray down. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge. Because this was the counter move. Clean. Prepared. Anticipated. He had a version ready. Controlled. Official. Mia leaned in again. Why do they look calmer now? Emily picked up a clean napkin. Folded it once. Then again. Because he gave them something to believe. Mia frowned. And you do not. Emily glanced toward the table. Jonathan was speaking again. Confident. Reassembled. I believe in patterns, she said quietly. Back at the table, Richard closed the receipt holder fully now. His expression had changed. Not convinced. But no longer certain. That mattered. Jonathan saw it. He leaned back, reclaiming space. We move forward, he said. One of the investors nodded. Agreed. Another. Added, pending final review of this version. Jonathan inclined his head. Of course. The pressure had shifted again. Not gone. Redirected. Emily wiped down the counter slowly. Her mind moved faster than her hands. Witness list. The message echoed. If there was a witness list, then it existed somewhere formal. Filed. Stored. Not something Jonathan could easily rewrite in real time. She reached into her apron and pulled out her phone again. This time, she opened a different tab. Public Record Search. New York City. Department of Buildings. She typed carefully. August 14th. 8th Avenue. Incident file. The loading circle spun for a second. Then a result appeared. Archived attachments. She tapped it. A list opened. Inspection summary. Structural assessment. And one more line. Witness statements. Emily's thumb hovered. Then she tapped. The file loaded slowly. Names appeared in a column. Contractors. Inspectors. Bystanders. She scanned quickly. Then stopped. Her breath slowed. Because one name was already familiar. Not from memory. From tonight. Richard Cole. Emily looked up immediately. Across the room, Richard sat at the table, flipping through Jonathan's folder. Calm. Controlled. As if this was all new to him. But his name was right there. On the list. A witness. Emily's grip tightened slightly on the phone. That changed everything. Because if he had been there, then he already knew what had been erased. And if he was pretending not to know, then he was not just reacting to the truth. He was waiting for something. Emily locked the phone and slipped it back into her apron. Her reflection caught in the glass again. Focused. Sharper now. Because the balance had shifted in a different direction. Not just between her and Jonathan. But across the entire table. She picked up a fresh picture and stepped forward again. This time, her eyes went straight to Richard. Because if he was on that list, then he was not just a witness. He was part of the story. And the next move would not come from the documents. It would come from him. Emily did not go to Richard immediately. She slowed her pace on purpose. One table at a time. One motion at a time. She refilled a glass near the window. She adjusted a napkin at table 4. She let the room settle into Jonathan's version of calm. Because the more confident he became, the more predictable he would be. At table 7, Jonathan was already closing the distance he had lost. We proceed with signatures tonight, he said, sliding the dark grey folder toward the center. Legal will finalize the rest in the morning. One investor nodded. Another reached for his pen. Richard Cole did not move. He was still reading. Careful. Slower than before. That mattered. Emily stepped closer now. Not to Jonathan. To Richard. She set the pitcher down beside him. Would you like more water, sir? Richard looked up. Their eyes met for half a second. Enough. Sure, he said. Casual. But his voice carried a slight edge now. Emily poured. Steady. Controlled. Then she leaned just enough to speak under the rhythm of the room. You were there that day, she said quietly. The words were simple. Direct. No accusation. No emotion. Just fact. Richard's hand paused on the edge of the folder. A fraction of a second. Then he looked at her. Really looked. Excuse me. Emily finished pouring. She straightened. August 14th, 8th Avenue. A beat. You are on the witness list. The air shifted again. Not across the whole room. Just at that seat. Richard's fingers tapped once against the table. Then stopped. He glanced briefly at Jonathan. Then back at Emily. That is a serious statement, he said. Emily held his gaze. So is signing something that removes a name. Jonathan's voice cut in. Smooth. Controlled. Is there a problem? Emily stepped back half a step. Professional distance. No, sir. Richard leaned back slightly. The folder remained open in front of him. But he was no longer reading it. He was thinking. That was the change. Subtle. But real. Jonathan watched both of them now. His attention sharpened again. We are finalizing, he said, tone firmer. If there are concerns, we address them after. Richard did not look at him. Some concerns do not wait. Silence followed. The other investors exchanged glances. One of them set his pen down. Another closed his folder halfway. The momentum Jonathan had rebuilt began to slow. Emily picked up the pitcher again. She turned away. But she did not leave the area completely. She moved to the adjacent table. Close enough to hear. Far enough to remain invisible. Behind her, Richard spoke again. Jonathan, was I listed on that report? Direct. No room to redirect. Jonathan did not answer immediately. He reached for his watch. Adjusted it. Covered the engraving again. A habit. A shield. There were multiple witnesses, he said. Documentation was streamlined. Richard's voice stayed calm. That is not what I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Emily set down a dessert menu for a couple nearby. Take your time, she said softly. Then she turned slightly. Listening. Jonathan leaned forward. You were present, yes, he said. But not relevant to the final filing. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. I watched them pull him out. The room did not stop. But the table did. One investor looked up sharply. Another shifted in his seat. Emily's grip tightened slightly around the menu in her hand. That was it. The line that had not been spoken yet. Now it was. Jonathan's expression remained controlled. But his voice dropped. We handled the situation appropriately. Richard shook his head once. You handled the paperwork. The distinction landed harder than anything before. Emily exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not tension. Recognition. Because the trap was no longer hers alone. It had expanded. She stepped back toward the service station. Her phone buzzed again. She did not rush to it. She already understood the pattern. Pieces were being placed. Timing was aligning. She wiped her hands once more. Then finally checked the screen. Another message. Same sender. This time, just 3 words. He was not alone. Emily's eyes lifted immediately. Because if Daniel Hayes had not been alone that day, then there was someone else missing from every version of the story. Emily did not move right away after reading the message. He was not alone. The words settled deeper than anything before. Not because they added confusion, but because they removed it. There had always been something missing. Now it had shape. She slipped the phone back into her apron and looked toward table 7. The conversation had tightened again. Richard Cole sat forward now. Not hesitant anymore. Engaged. Who else was there? Jonathan, he asked. Direct. No buffer. Jonathan did not respond immediately. His fingers rested on the edge of the dark grey folder. Still. Controlled. But no longer relaxed. We are not reopening an archived incident in the middle of a transaction, he said. One of the investors spoke up. If there is another name, we need to know. That was new. Not curiosity. Requirement. The balance shifted again. Emily picked up a tray with 2 glasses of red wine and moved toward the table. Slow. Precise. She set 1 glass in front of the younger investor. Then the second near Richard. Careful, it is a Napa cab, she said softly. Routine words. But her timing was not routine. Because she stayed 1 second longer than necessary. Just enough to hear the next line. Richard did not look at her. But his voice dropped slightly. I remember 2 stretchers, he said. 1 covered. 1 not. The words landed heavier than anything before. Jonathan's jaw tightened. This time, it did not release immediately. Memory is not always accurate, he replied. Emily stepped back. Her heartbeat remained steady. Because this was it. The second line. The missing piece. She moved to the service station and pulled out her phone again. This time, she did not search. She opened the same witness file. Scrolled further down. Past the names. Past the signatures. There. At the bottom. A note. Attached media. She tapped it. The file loaded slower than the others. Larger. A scanned photograph. Grainy. Taken from a distance. Emergency tape. A collapsed section of building. And near the center. 2 figures on the ground. 1 partially covered. 1 fully covered. Emily zoomed in. The quality blurred. But the outline was clear enough. 2. Not 1. Her breath slowed. Then steadied again. She lowered the phone. Across the room, Jonathan leaned forward again. His voice sharper now. We are done with this discussion. 1 investor shook his head. No, we are not. Richard closed his folder completely. The sound was deliberate. Final. If there is a second person, this deal pauses. That changed everything. Not just tension. Direction. Jonathan looked at him. Really looked this time. Measuring risk. Calculating loss. You are making a mistake, he said. Richard's voice stayed calm. I already did. I am correcting it. Silence followed. Not empty. Loaded. The kind that shifts outcomes. Emily stepped forward again. Not to serve. Not to adjust. This time, she walked directly to the edge of the table. Sir, she said, addressing Richard, you left something open earlier. He looked up. She placed the receipt holder back in front of him. Inside, the phone screen was still on. The highlighted name visible. Daniel Hayes. But now, she reached into her apron and added something else. Her own phone. She placed it beside the first one. The image of the two stretchers filled the screen. No explanation. No framing. Just evidence. The table went still. Completely. Richard looked down. Then back up at Jonathan. That is not a misunderstanding, he said quietly. Jonathan did not touch the phones. He did not look away either. But something in his posture shifted. Not control. Not yet. But pressure. Real. Measurable. Emily stepped back. No longer part of the exchange. But no longer invisible either. One of the investors whispered, "Who is the second person?" No one answered. Because for the first time tonight, the question was not about what had been hidden. It was about who had been erased. Emily turned away slowly. She walked back toward the service station. Her reflection caught again in the glass. Focused. Certain. Because now the story had changed. Not a mistake. Not a misreport. A removal. And if there was a second name missing from every version, then someone had decided that person should never be found. No one spoke for a full 3 seconds. Not because they did not have questions. Because they finally had answers. Richard Cole kept his eyes on the second phone. The image did not move. It did not explain itself. It did not need to. That is two, he said quietly. One of the investors leaned forward. Zoom in. Richard did not touch the device. Instead, he looked at Emily. Can you? Emily stepped forward. Calm. Deliberate. She picked up her phone and enlarged the image further. The pixels stretched, but the shapes held. 2 stretchers. 2 outlines. One fully covered. One partially visible. A second figure. Undeniable now. That is not a shadow, the younger investor said under his breath. Jonathan remained still. His hand rested flat on the table. No movement toward the phones. No attempt to interrupt. But his silence had changed. It was no longer control. It was calculation under pressure. Richard leaned back slowly. There were 2, he said again. Not a question this time. A statement. Jonathan exhaled once. Controlled. Then he reached for the dark grey folder. He opened it. Flipped past the first few pages. Then stopped. He pulled out a single sheet. He placed it on the table between them. This is the finalized liability release, he said. His voice returned to its measured tone. Signed and filed. Richard did not touch it. Read it, Jonathan added. One of the investors leaned in and scanned the page. His brow tightened. This only lists one individual. Jonathan nodded. Correct. Emily watched from the edge of the table. Not speaking. Not interrupting. But present. Because this was the pivot. Richard's gaze did not leave Jonathan. Then where is the second name? Jonathan held his stare. It was never classified as a separate case. That answer did not land the way he intended. The younger investor sat up straighter. What does that mean? Jonathan's tone sharpened slightly. It means the situation was consolidated under a single report. Richard let out a slow breath. You combined them. A pause. Then Jonathan said, we resolved the exposure. Emily's fingers tightened slightly at her side. That word again. Resolved. She stepped forward. Not as a server. As someone holding a missing piece. That is not what the city record shows, she said. The table turned toward her. Jonathan's eyes narrowed slightly. You should not be part of this conversation. Emily did not move. The witness file lists both positions on the ground, she continued. But only one name was filed. Richard looked at her. You saw the full file. Emily nodded once. And the media attachment. She tapped her phone lightly. The image still visible. The younger investor leaned back. So someone removed a name after the fact. Richard's voice followed. Or never included it to begin with. Jonathan's jaw tightened again. This time, he did not answer immediately. The silence stretched longer than before. Then Emily reached into her apron one more time. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. Slightly worn. Carefully kept. She placed it on the table beside the other documents. I did not plan to use this tonight, she said. Richard unfolded it slowly. His eye scanned the page. Then stopped. The room shifted again. Harder this time. Because this was not a report. Not a scan. Not a reconstruction. It was a receipt. Dated August 14th. Issued by a temporary medical unit. 2 entries. 2 initials. DH and EC. Richard looked up. EC? Emily met his gaze. Emily Carter. The name settled into the room. Not as a server. As a record. As presence. One of the investors leaned forward. You were there. Emily nodded. I was the second person on that pavement. Jonathan's composure cracked. Not visibly. Not loudly. But enough. His hand moved toward his watch again. Then stopped halfway. For the first time, he did not complete the gesture. Richard placed the receipt down slowly. So the second name was never missing, he said. It was removed. Emily held her ground. And replaced with silence. No one spoke after that. Because the evidence was no longer abstract. It had a date. A location. A second name. Jonathan finally leaned back. His voice lower now. What do you want? Emily looked at him. Not angry. Not loud. Just clear. The truth where it belongs. The room held that line. Because for the first time, the question was no longer whether something had been hidden. It was who had decided it would stay that way. And Jonathan Reed had just run out of places to put it. The room did not move. The air held everything in place. Jonathan Reed sat still with the receipt in front of him, the initials staring back like something that refused to fade. Emily Carter stood across from him, her hand steady but her breath slower now, as if something inside her had finally caught up. Richard leaned back, silent, letting the weight settle where it belonged. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jonathan's fingers moved. Not to the folder. Not to the deal. To the watch. He slid it off his wrist again, but this time there was no precision in the motion. It hesitated. His hand trembled just enough to break the pattern he had held all night. He stared at the engraving. August 14th. DH. The letters that had carried his version of the story. The ones that had allowed him to compress everything into something manageable. Something controlled. His voice, when it came, was lower than before. You think you understand what happened? Emily did not answer immediately. She watched him. Not as a server. Not as an opponent. As someone who had been there. I understand what was left out, she said. The words landed softly. That made them heavier. Jonathan closed his eyes for a brief second. Then opened them again. And something shifted. Not in the room. In him. A memory pressed forward without permission. The heat of that afternoon. The sound of sirens getting closer. A young man's voice, barely audible, asking if anyone could hear him. Jonathan standing just outside the taped line, phone pressed to his ear, already speaking to legal. We need to control this before it escalates. The words had come out clean. Efficient. Necessary. He remembered turning away before the second stretcher was lifted. He remembered not asking a question he already knew the answer to. Back in the present, his hand tightened around the watch. His knuckles whitened slightly. Then eased. There were decisions made, he said. The sentence felt smaller than everything behind it. Emily's eyes did not leave him. There were people, she replied. That line cut deeper. Because it removed the distance. It removed the language that made things easier to carry. Jonathan swallowed once. His throat tightened. For the first time that night, his voice did not return immediately. He looked at the receipt again. The second set of initials. EC. His gaze lifted slowly. You were conscious, he said. Emily nodded. Long enough to hear everything. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that had not been said that day. Jonathan exhaled. A longer breath this time. Less controlled. His shoulders lowered slightly. The weight shifted. Not gone. But acknowledged. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. The motion was slower than anything he had done before. He unlocked it. His thumb hovered over the screen. Hesitated. Then moved. Richard watched without interrupting. The investors remained still. No one rushed him. No one filled the space. Jonathan placed the phone on the table. Speaker mode. The dialing tone filled the quiet room. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then a voice answered on the other end. Read legal. Jonathan closed his eyes for half a second. Then spoke. This is Jonathan. A pause. His voice steadied, but it carried something new. I need you to pull the original August 14th incident file. Full version. No edits. The voice on the other end responded quickly. Sir, that file was all ready, Jonathan cut in. Not sharply. Firmly. No edits, he repeated. A beat. Then he added, quieter now, restore every name. The line went silent for a second. Then, understood. The call ended. Jonathan did not move his hand away from the phone immediately. When he did, his fingers lingered on the table. As if grounding himself. He looked at Emily again. His eyes were different now. Not defensive. Not calculating. Just clear. It should have been done then, he said. Emily's breath caught slightly. Not from shock. From the weight of hearing it said out loud. Her fingers curled lightly at her side. A small tremor passed through them. She did not hide it. A single tear formed at the corner of her eye. She blinked once. It slipped down quietly. She did not wipe it away. It is being done now, she replied. The room remained still. But something had shifted completely. Not the power. Not the outcome. The truth had moved from silence into place. And for the first time that night, it was no longer being managed. It was being faced. The restaurant did not return to normal after the call. It softened. Conversations resumed, but quieter now, as if the room itself understood something had shifted beyond business. Jonathan Reed remained seated for a moment longer, his phone still on the table, his watch lying beside it instead of on his wrist. For the first time, there was nothing covering the engraving. No shield. No distance. Just a date and 2 letters that no longer held the full story. Emily Carter stepped back slowly, giving space without leaving. Richard closed the folders one by one, not rushing, not speaking, as if each page now carried weight that could not be negotiated away. One of the investors stood and adjusted his jacket. We will wait for the updated file, he said quietly. No one argued. No one pushed forward. The deal had stopped moving. Jonathan finally stood. His posture was different now. Less rigid. More grounded. He picked up the watch, held it in his palm, then placed it into his jacket pocket instead of putting it back on. That small decision did not go unnoticed. He turned toward Emily. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple. They carried more than any explanation he could have offered. Emily nodded once. Her hands were still, but her eyes were softer now. "It was already yours to carry," she replied. Jonathan took a breath, then walked past her toward the exit. Not hurried. Not escaping. Just moving forward. Outside, the Manhattan night air was cool. The city lights reflected off the glass doors as they closed behind him. He stopped on the sidewalk. For a second, he did not move. Then his phone vibrated again. A message from legal. File retrieved. Awaiting confirmation to restore. Jonathan looked at the screen. His thumb hovered. Then he typed. Restore everything. No redactions. Send to all parties. He pressed send. The decision settled in his chest, heavier than before, but cleaner. Inside the restaurant, Emily leaned against the service counter for a brief moment. The tension she had held all night released slowly. Mia approached, eyes wide. What just happened? Emily let out a quiet breath. Something that should have happened a long time ago. Mia shook her head. You just changed everything. Emily glanced toward the door. No, she said softly. It was already there. She picked up a clean glass and began to polish it. The same motion. The same rhythm. But her hands trembled slightly now. Just once. Then steadied. Minutes later, the front door opened again. Fast this time. Not controlled. A woman stepped in, breath uneven, eyes searching the room. Mid-30s. Dark coat. Her hair slightly out of place as if she had come in a hurry. She scanned the tables until her gaze landed on Emily. For a second, they both froze. Then the woman moved. Quick steps across the floor, weaving between tables without hesitation. Emily. Her voice broke on the name. Emily's breath caught. Claire. The distance between them disappeared in an instant. Claire reached her first, her hands gripping Emily's shoulders before pulling her into a tight embrace. The kind that does not ask permission. The kind that holds on. Emily's body tensed for a fraction of a second. Then gave in. Her arms wrapped around Claire. Strong. Certain. The tray she had been holding slipped onto the counter behind her with a soft sound. Claire's voice trembled against her shoulder. I thought I lost you that day. Emily closed her eyes. The memory flashed again. Heat. Noise. The weight of the pavement. But this time, it did not stay there. It moved. It connected. Her fingers tightened slightly in Claire's coat. You did not, she whispered. Her voice broke at the edges. A tear slipped down her cheek, then another. She did not hold them back. Claire pulled back just enough to look at her face. Her own eyes filled. I have been trying to find you for years. Emily shook her head gently. I was trying to forget. Claire's hand moved to Emily's face, brushing away a tear with trembling fingers. You do not have to carry it alone anymore. The words landed softly. But they stayed. Emily let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding for years. Her shoulders lowered. Her grip loosened, then tightened again, not from fear this time, but from relief. Behind them, the restaurant continued. Plates moved. Voices returned. But in that small space, everything had narrowed to something simple and real. Emily rested her forehead lightly against Claire's. We both made it, she said quietly. Claire nodded through tears. And now we get to keep going. Emily closed her eyes for a second, letting the moment settle fully. Then she opened them again. Clear. Present. This time, she said softly, "We tell the truth and we stay."